The giant crystal room on the alien spaceship buzzed with strange voices from different worlds. Ambassador Velthar walked forward on his 6 legs, his forearms moving like he was swatting away flies. He looked down at the single human sitting at the black stone table like he was looking at a bug. Commander Li Hyun sat perfectly straight in his chair. He was about 50 years old with gray hair at his temples, but his back was straight like a soldier. His uniform was simple blue and white, nothing fancy like the colorful robes the aliens wore. The room was huge, big enough to fit a small building inside, with walls that glowed with soft purple light. Commander Li Hyun, the alien's voice came through a machine that made it sound cold and empty. The Galactic Council has made its final choice. Your people have exactly 72 hours to leave all your outer space colonies and let us rule over you. Li Hyun didn't move a muscle. His dark eyes stayed locked on the alien's face while the big creature kept talking. Around them, other aliens whispered to each other in languages that sounded like clicks, hisses, and musical notes. Some looked like giant insects, others like walking trees, and a few resembled nothing Li Hyun had ever seen before. "If you don't do what we say," Velthar continued, his mouth parts clicking together in what might have been a laugh, "we will use our military to force you. Your simple weapons and small fleet of ships cannot fight against our power." The other council members made sounds of agreement. There were 11 different alien species in the room, and they all thought the same thing about humans. To them, people from Earth were just babies who had barely learned to fly between stars. Humans had only been in space for about 200 years, while some of these aliens had been traveling the galaxy for millions of years. Velthar's translator kept going. "We know everything about your military. You have maybe 200 ships, most of them small destroyers and cruisers. We have thousands upon thousands of warships. Your weapons still use old kinetic energy and nuclear bombs. Ours use pure energy and matter conversion. You are like children playing with sticks while we hold lightning." Li Hyun watched the alien's 4 eyes blink one at a time. The creature's skin looked like purple leather, with silver spots that seemed to shift and move. Its breath smelled like burnt metal and old flowers. Behind Velthar, a massive screen showed images of human colonies, small settlements on distant planets where families had built new lives. "We are not unreasonable," Velthar said, his voice getting softer through the translator. "We will let your people live. You will work for us, follow our rules, and in time you might even be allowed to have some freedom. But you must understand your place in the galaxy. You are the youngest, weakest species here." The other aliens nodded their heads, tentacles, or whatever they used to show agreement. A creature that looked like a walking crystal made tinkling. Sounds that the translator said meant they should be grateful we're not just wiping them out. Another alien that resembled a giant octopus waved its arms and said something about humans being amusing pets. Finally, Li Hyun spoke. His voice was calm and steady, like he was ordering coffee instead of hearing threats about the end of human freedom. "I understand your position, Ambassador. I need to talk to Earth Command before I can give you our answer." "Of course," Velthar replied, spreading his forearms wide like he was being very generous. "Though I think you will find that giving up is your only smart choice. Your leaders back on Earth must know they cannot fight us and win." 2 alien guards, each 8 feet tall and covered in what looked like natural armor, stepped forward to escort Li Hyun out of the chamber. As the human commander stood up and walked toward the door, he allowed himself the smallest smile, so small that none of the aliens noticed it. But if they had been watching more carefully, they might have seen something dangerous in that smile. They might have wondered why a man facing the end of his species' independence looked almost pleased. They might have asked themselves what they didn't know about humans and their preparations for this exact moment. The council had no idea what they had just started. They thought they were dealing with frightened children who would beg for mercy. They had no clue they had just poked a sleeping dragon that had been preparing for this day for decades. Fleet Admiral Kreshmoto stood in front of the giant, glowing screens that showed everything the aliens knew about human military power. The blue lights reflected off his scaly green skin as he looked at the numbers with disgust. His long tail swished back and forth, hitting the metal floor with sharp clicks that echoed through the command room. "Look at this joke," he snarled, pointing one of his clawed fingers at the display. 200 ships. That's all they have. 200 tiny ships spread across 12 different star systems like scattered toys. The holographic images showed Earth's fleet in detail. Most were destroyers and cruisers, the kind of ships that other species used for patrol duty or escorting. Cargo vessels. Nothing that looked like it could fight a real war against a serious military force. The largest human ship was maybe half the size of a standard Council battleship. Commander Thexara floated beside him, her jellyfish-like body pulsing with different colors as she laughed. Her tentacles danced in the air as she pulled up more information on her control panel. Our intelligence teams have been watching them for months, Admiral. They're still using the same old kinetic weapons they've had for decades. Kinetic weapons, Kishimoto repeated, shaking his massive head. They're still throwing chunks of metal at targets and hoping to hit something. Meanwhile, we have plasma cannons that can melt through a planet's crust and energy shields that can stop a small star from exploding. Other officers around the command center started chuckling. Captain Zorthek, who looked like a walking tree, with crystals growing from his bark, made a rumbling sound that was his species' version of laughter. I heard they still use nuclear weapons, too. Nuclear weapons, like something from the Stone Age. Our weapons turn matter into pure energy, added Commander Yexhai, her insect-like wings buzzing with excitement. Their biggest bombs are like firecrackers compared to what we can do. One of our dreadnoughts could probably destroy their entire fleet by itself. Kishimoto pulled up tactical information about human fighting styles. The data showed battle, recordings from small conflicts between humans and space pirates or rebel groups. Look at how they fight, he said, pointing at the screen. They line up their ships in straight formations and charge directly at the enemy. No clever tricks, no advanced tactics, just brute force. Thexara's tentacles wiggled with amusement. They fight like wild animals. No planning, no strategy, just aggression and anger. They probably think war is about who can shoot the most bullets. The fleet admiral brought up deployment orders on his personal screen. His claws clicked against the buttons as he selected which ships to send. We'll use Task Force Hammer for this operation. 2,000 ships should be more than enough to handle their entire military. 2,000 ships. Captain Zorthek's branches rustled with surprise. Admiral, isn't that overkill? We could probably handle all of humanity with a few hundred vessels. Kishimoto's yellow eyes glowed brighter as he grinned, showing rows of sharp teeth. I want to make sure there's no doubt about the outcome. When we're done with them, every species in the galaxy will know what happens when you defy the Council. Besides, it'll be good training for our younger officers. Around the command room, dozens of alien officers from different species all nodded or made their own sounds of agreement. They came from worlds where warfare had been perfected over millions of years. They had technology that could reshape reality itself, weapons that could destroy entire solar systems, and defensive systems that could protect against attacks from other dimensions. Commander Thexara floated closer to the main display, her body glowing with confidence. Our intelligence reports show they don't even have proper shields on most of their ships. They rely on thick metal armor, like they're building tanks instead of spacecraft. Primitive, Kishimoto growled. Absolutely primitive. They probably think space combat is like the old wars they fought on their planet's surface. Line up, point your weapons at the enemy, and hope for the best. The laughter in the command center grew louder as more officers joined the conversation. They shared stories about other young species they had encountered and defeated easily. None of them had ever faced serious resistance from a race that had been in space for less than 1,000 years. This will be over in days, Kishimoto announced as he finalized the attack orders. Maybe hours. We'll show up, destroy their pathetic fleet, and then they'll surrender like every other species that's tried to resist us. But as the alien officers celebrated their upcoming easy victory, none of them noticed something important in their intelligence reports. All their information about human military capabilities came from public sources, official announcements, and observations of routine patrol activities. They had never seen what humans were really capable of when they were truly threatened. The Council was about to learn a very hard lesson about the difference between what humans let others see and what they kept hidden in the darkness between stars. Miles beneath the Colorado Mountains, in rooms carved from solid rock, Admiral Park Min-ho stood in front of dozens of glowing screens. Each monitor showed a different part of the galaxy, with tiny dots representing ships, planets, and space stations. His fingers, marked with old scars from his younger days as a fighter pilot, moved quickly across the control panel. The command center buzzed with quiet activity. Officers sat at workstations arranged in a circle around the main floor, their faces lit by the blue glow of their computers. Some wore headsets and spoke in whispers to people on distant worlds. Others typed rapidly, sending coded messages across the galaxy at the speed of light. Protocol Omega is now active, Park Min-ho announced, his voice carrying clearly through the underground chamber. All our sleeping agents are waking up. The room got even busier as confirmation messages started pouring in from across Council space. These weren't just random signals. They were coming from humans who had spent years, sometimes decades, living among the aliens. They had normal jobs, families, and friends in alien cities. But they were also soldiers waiting for this exact moment. Captain Kim Nari looked up from her intelligence station, her short black hair reflecting the screen's light. She had been tracking these agents for 15 years, watching them build their cover lives while secretly gathering information. Admiral, we now have complete access to all Council military communications. Agent So Ji-won just confirmed that the defense platforms around their capital are under our control. Park Min-ho nodded but didn't smile. This moment had been 30 years in the making. While the aliens thought humans were just angry barbarians who fought with simple weapons, humanity had been playing a much more complex game. They had been patient, careful, and incredibly thorough. Status report on the hidden fleet, he ordered, turning to the tactical station. Colonel Choi Dae-hyun had been a submarine captain before joining the Space Force, and he understood the value of staying invisible until the right moment. All 7,000 ships are in position, sir. The dark matter cloaking systems are working perfectly. Our vessels are completely invisible to Council sensors. 7,000 ships. The aliens thought humans only had 200 vessels total. They had no idea that humanity had been building a secret fleet for decades, hidden in asteroid fields, dark nebulae, and the empty spaces between stars. Each ship was equipped with technology that the Council didn't even know existed. Park Min-ho walked to the center of the room, where a massive holographic display showed the entire galaxy. Red dots marked Council territories, while green dots showed human positions. But there were also yellow dots, thousands of them, scattered throughout alien space. Each yellow dot represented a human agent, a saboteur, or a hidden weapons cache. Begin. Final preparations, he commanded. Activate all civilian evacuation protocols. Across human space, families were already packing their belongings and heading to underground shelters that had been built in secret over the past 3 decades. These weren't just simple bunkers. They were entire underground cities with their own power sources, food production, and manufacturing facilities. Humanity had learned from their history that when war came, you had to be ready to protect everyone. At the same time, factories and shipyards were switching to wartime production. Civilian manufacturing plants that normally made everyday items were now producing ammunition, weapons, and ship parts. Asteroid mining stations stopped gathering rare metals for trade and started building weapon platforms. Even passenger ships were being quickly converted into combat vessels. Captain Kim Nari's fingers flew across her keyboard as she coordinated with agents throughout the galaxy. Sir, all our people are reporting ready status. Agent Lee Jamin has confirmed that the Council's main communication relay is ready for our signal. Agent Park Soo-young reports that their military academy's computer systems are compromised. The Admiral looked around the room at his officers. Many of them had grey hair like him, veterans who had been preparing for this war since they were young. Others were newer to the service, but they all understood what was at stake. This wasn't just about defending human colonies. This was about the survival of their entire species. What about our manufacturing capacity? Park Min-ho asked. All factories are now operating at maximum wartime production, replied Major Kim Taiwan from the logistics station. We can build and launch 3 new ships every day. Our ammunition production is up by 400% and still increasing. Park Min-ho activated the final sequence on his command console. Warning lights began flashing throughout the complex as the last safety protocols were removed. Across human space, military commanders received their final orders. The time for hiding and preparation was over. Everyone listen carefully, the Admiral said, his voice carrying the weight of 30 years of planning. The Council thinks we're primitive and weak. They're about to learn that humans don't just fight wars, we end them. Show them what happens when someone threatens our children and our future. In the depths of Cheyenne Mountain, humanity's true face was finally revealed. They weren't the simple, aggressive species the aliens thought they knew. They were patient predators who had been preparing for this moment since the day they first met the Council. 2,000 alien warships dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Proxima Centauri system, like a swarm of angry metal insects. Fleet Admiral Kishimoto stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, expecting to see human ships desperately trying to defend their colony world. His 4 yellow eyes scanned the tactical displays, looking for the pathetic fleet of 200 vessels that intelligence had promised him. Instead, he found nothing but empty black space and complete silence. "Where are the humans?" he growled, his clawed hands gripping the command rail so hard it started to bend. The metal groaned under the pressure as his frustration grew. "Our intelligence said they would be here protecting their colony." Commander Thexara floated nervously beside him, her jellyfish-like body pulsing with worried colors instead of her usual confident brightness. Her tentacles twitched as she checked and rechecked her sensor readings. "Sir, I'm not detecting any human vessels in the immediate area. No ships, no defense platforms, nothing." Around them, other alien officers murmured in confusion. "Captain." Zorthek's crystal growths dimmed with uncertainty, while Commander Yexhai's wings buzzed with nervous energy. They had expected an easy victory against a desperate enemy, not this eerie emptiness. That's when the nightmare began. The first attack came without warning, faster than thought itself. A chunk of metal no bigger than a football hit the flagships, left side at 30% the speed of light. At that velocity, it didn't just punch through their shields and armor, it went through them like they were made of paper. The impact created a hole 20 feet wide that went completely through the ship. Before Kishimoto could even understand what had happened, 17 more ships around him simply stopped existing. They didn't explode in dramatic fireballs like in the movies. They just vanished, turned instantly into clouds of superheated gas by projectiles that had been quietly coasting through space for hours, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "What's happening?" Kishimoto screamed, his voice cracking with fear and confusion. Emergency alarms blared throughout his ship as damage reports flooded in. "How are they hitting us? Where are they?" The answer came from everywhere at once. Suddenly, the empty space around them filled with human ships appearing out of nowhere. But these weren't the primitive vessels the Council had expected. These were sleek, deadly predators that looked like they had been designed by nightmares. Their black hulls seemed to absorb light, making them hard to see even when they were right in front of you. "Evasive maneuvers," Kishimoto screamed at his helmsman, but it was already far too late. The human ships opened fire with weapons that the aliens didn't even recognize. Beams of pure energy that turned solid metal into gas on contact. Missiles that could think for themselves and hunt down targets. Projectiles that moved so fast, they created their own gravity fields. Captain Han Jisoo sat calmly in the command chair of her stealth destroyer, watching the alien fleet panic and scatter like frightened fish. Her ship had been invisible to their sensors until the moment she chose to reveal herself. Around her, dozens of other human vessels did the same, appearing from behind asteroids, from within gas clouds, and from the dark spaces between worlds. "All units execute pattern Omega-7, she ordered, her voice steady and professional. "No survivors, no prisoners." Her crew moved with deadly efficiency. They had trained for this moment for years, practicing these exact maneuvers until they could perform them in their sleep. Every shot was calculated, every movement planned, every attack coordinated with surgical precision. The aliens' supposedly superior technology meant nothing against humanity's perfected art of warfare. Their energy shields couldn't stop weapons that operated on principles they didn't understand. Their advanced armor was useless against projectiles that could punch through planets. Their faster-than-light communication systems were jammed by human electronic warfare that turned their own networks against them. Within 6 hours, Task Force Hammer was completely destroyed. 2,000 of the galaxy's most advanced warships had been reduced to expanding clouds of debris and radiation. The aliens who had laughed at human primitiveness were now dead, their atoms scattered across the solar system. Not a single human ship had even been scratched. Captain Han Ji-soo stood up from her command chair and walked to the communications station. Her crew watched in respectful silence as she opened a channel to the Council's main headquarters on Nexus Prime, where the alien leaders were probably still celebrating their expected easy victory. "This is Captain Han of the Terran Defense Force," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the galaxy. "Your corrective action has been corrected. Permanently." She paused for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in across the light years. Then she continued, her tone as cold as the space between stars. "You sent 2,000 ships to teach us a lesson about power. We've sent you a lesson in return. The next time you threaten human lives, we won't stop with just one. Fleet, we'll come for all of you." The transmission ended, leaving only silence in its wake. In the Proxima Centauri system, human ships began the process of cleaning up the debris field that had once been the Council's mighty task force Hammer. They worked quickly and efficiently, erasing every trace of the alien presence. The Council had wanted to demonstrate their superiority over humanity. Instead, they had just learned that when you threaten a sleeping dragon, you don't get to choose how it wakes up. The great crystal chamber that had seen 1,000,000 years of peaceful council, meetings now echoed with screams of panic and fear. "Supreme Chancellor." Mordekan slammed his ceremonial staff against the glowing floor over and over, the sound ringing out like a broken bell. His ancient voice cracked as he tried to restore order to the chaos erupting around him. "Silence. Everyone. Be quiet," he shouted. But nobody was listening anymore. Ambassador Velthar stumbled into the center of the chamber, his 4 arms shaking as he clutched a data pad filled with disaster reports. His purple skin had turned pale gray with shock, and his voice came out as a high-pitched screech that hurt everyone's ears. 17 attacks at the same time," he cried out, waving the data pad in the air. "They hit our supply depot at Kepler Station, completely destroyed. Our military garrison at Wolf 359 is gone. Every ship, every soldier, everything. And somehow they've broken into our entire communication network." Around the chamber, representatives from 11 different alien species all started talking at once. Some were crying, others were shouting orders, and a few just sat in stunned silence. The hegemony delegate, a massive creature that looked like a walking tree, kept repeating, "Impossible, impossible," in his deep, rumbling voice. What none of them knew was that Commander Yoon Seo-jun was watching everything from just a few hundred yards away. He sat quietly in the cargo hold of what looked like an ordinary transport ship, one of dozens docked at the Council's main naval base. To anyone checking the records, he was just a maintenance worker from a small trading company. In reality, he had been living this fake life for 23 years. His small communicator, hidden inside what looked like a normal tool, crackled to life with a whispered message. "Phoenix Actual, this is Phoenix 7, he spoke quietly into the device. "All target packages are confirmed. The orbital defense grid is completely under our control." The response came immediately in Admiral Park Min-ho's cold, steady voice. "All Phoenix units execute terminal protocol. Show them what happens when you threaten humanity." Yoon Seo-jun smiled grimly as he activated the devices he had been secretly installing throughout the base for over 2 decades. Around him, hundreds of other humans were doing the same thing across 12 different star systems. They were janitors, mechanics, cooks, clerks, and traders. But they were also soldiers who had been waiting patiently for this exact moment. The bomb. First explosion lit up the night sky above the Council's primary ammunition depot. Then another blast destroyed their main shipyard, where new vessels were being built. Within minutes, military installations across the galaxy began erupting in massive fireballs that could be seen from orbit. At the Nexus Prime Command Center, General Kexithara watched in horror as his tactical displays showed one disaster after another. "How is this possible?" he whispered to his staff. "These facilities are supposed to be the most secure locations in our territory." His communications officer A young alien who looked like a cross between a dolphin and an octopus looked up with terror in her large eyes. "Sir, we're receiving reports that the attacks are coming from inside our own bases. Our own people are destroying everything." But they weren't the Council's own people at all. They were humans who had spent decades learning alien languages, studying alien cultures, and slowly working their way into positions where they could do the most damage when the time came. They had married aliens, raised alien children, and lived completely normal lives while secretly preparing for war. Commander Park Ji-ho had been working as a communications technician on the Council's main military satellite for 15 years. When he received the activation signal, he calmly walked to the central control room and began uploading a virus that would shut down the entire network. His alien co-workers, who considered him a good friend, watched in confusion as their systems began failing one by one. Meanwhile, Agent Kim Sora, who had been teaching at the Council's War College for 12 years, activated explosive charges she had hidden throughout the building. The college where alien officers learned military strategy disappeared in a massive fireball, taking with it centuries of tactical knowledge and dozens of high-ranking commanders. Back in the council chamber, Supreme Chancellor Mordecai's personal communicator chimed with an incoming message. His hands shook as he activated the device, hoping for good news from his military commanders. Instead, he heard a human voice that was colder than the space between stars. "This is Admiral Lee So-young of Earth Command," the voice said with deadly calm. "You demanded our submission. We offer your extinction instead. The choice is yours." The message continued while the council members listened in growing horror. "For 30 years, we have lived among you. We have learned your weaknesses, studied your fears, and prepared for this day. You thought we were primitive barbarians who could be easily crushed. You were wrong." Mordecai's ancient legs gave out, and he collapsed onto his ceremonial throne. Around him, the other council members finally understood the terrible truth. This wasn't a desperate last stand by a cornered enemy. This was a carefully planned campaign of total destruction that had been decades in the making. Every military base, every communication relay, every supply depot you depend on has been compromised, Admiral Lee's voice continued. Your fleets are cut off from command. Your armies are isolated and blind. Your weapons factories are burning, and this is just the beginning. The transmission ended with words that would haunt the survivors for the rest of their lives. You wanted to teach humanity about power. Class is now in session. In the silence that followed, the council finally realized they weren't fighting a war anymore. They were trying to survive an extinction event that wore a human face. In the cold darkness between stars, where no alien sensors had ever detected them, 7,000 human warships hung motionless like sleeping giants. Captain Jung Min-seo stood on the bridge of the Retribution, a massive dreadnought that was 3 times larger than anything the Council thought humans could build. For over 10 years, this fleet had been waiting in the shadows, invisible and patient. The ship was nothing like the crude vessels the aliens had seen in their intelligence reports. Instead of thick metal armor and simple weapons, the Retribution had a hull made from materials that bent light around it, and weapons that could reshape reality itself. Every surface was smooth and black, designed to absorb every form of energy the Council might use to detect it. "All units begin Phase 2 operations," Admiral Park Min-ho's voice came through the quantum communication system that allowed instant contact across any distance. "Target every Council homeworld at the same time." Jung Min-seo looked around his bridge at officers who had spent their entire careers preparing for this moment. Lieutenant Bai Jion sat at the engineering station, her fingers dancing across controls that managed technology the aliens couldn't even imagine. Commander Oh Sunwoo monitored weapon systems that could crack planets like eggs. Major Lee Dong-hyun coordinated with special forces teams that were already moving through alien cities. For decades, the Council had laughed at human technology, thinking it was primitive and outdated. They had seen the kinetic weapons, the nuclear missiles, and the metal armor, and assumed that was all humanity had. They never realized that humans had been deliberately showing them old, obsolete equipment while secretly developing weapons. That made alien technology look like children's toys. "Engineering, what's the status on the stellar collapse array?" Jung Minseo asked, turning to Lieutenant Bai Ji-yeon. She looked up from her console with calm professionalism, even though she was about to help destroy an entire solar system. "Ready for activation, Captain. We can make their star go supernova in 30 minutes. The stellar manipulation device was humanity's most terrifying weapon. It could reach into the heart of a star and change the way it burned, turning a peaceful sun into an exploding bomb that would destroy everything within 20 light years. The aliens had never even imagined such technology was possible. Meanwhile, on the surface of Hegemony Prime, Major Kim Tae-hyung moved silently through the corridors of the Council's most important research facility. He wore a stealth suit that made him completely invisible to alien sensors, and he carried weapons that could kill without making a sound. Behind him, his team of Special Forces soldiers moved like ghosts through the building. They weren't there to steal information or capture prisoners. They were there to deliver something much more deadly. For 30 years, human scientists had been studying every alien species in the Council, learning how their bodies worked, what diseases they could catch, and what would kill them most efficiently. "Package delivered," Kim Tae-hyung whispered into. His communicator, as his team, placed the final bioweapon containers in the facility's air circulation system. Pathogen deployment in 4 hours. The bioweapons were designed specifically for each alien species. What would kill a Nexus Coalition member wouldn't even affect a Hegemony citizen, and vice versa. But humans had created different versions. For all 11 species, each one perfectly tailored to cause maximum damage with no chance of survival. Across the galaxy, the same scene was playing out on dozens of worlds. Human agents who had lived normal lives for decades were suddenly revealing their true purpose. The friendly maintenance worker who had been fixing alien computers for 20 years was actually installing viruses that would cripple their entire network. The popular teacher who had been educating alien children was really mapping their cities for orbital bombardment. Captain Jung Minseo watched his tactical display as reports came in from across human space. Every Council homeworld was being targeted simultaneously by weapons they had never seen before. Their most secure facilities were being destroyed from within by people they had trusted. Their most advanced defenses were useless against technology they didn't understand. "Sir," Commander Oh Sunwoo reported from the weapons station, "we're receiving confirmation from all strike teams. Every target is ready for simultaneous destruction." The Council had finally realized the terrible truth. This wasn't a war between equals. This was an extinction event being carried out by a species that had spent centuries learning how to kill efficiently and completely. Humans weren't trying to win territory or gain resources. They were trying to erase the Council from existence entirely. Intercepted alien communications painted a picture of growing terror across their territory. "They're not fighting a war," one panicked Council general transmitted to his superiors. "They're conducting an extermination. They want to wipe us out completely." Another message from a civilian leader on Nexus Prime was even more desperate. "How did we not see this coming? How did they hide this from us for so long? They've been planning our destruction since the day we first met them." The truth was simple and terrifying. Humans had never been the primitive barbarians the Council thought they were. They were apex predators who had evolved on a world where only the strongest and smartest survived. They had spent their entire history perfecting the art of warfare, and now they were about to demonstrate what thousands of years of conflict had taught them. The age of Council dominance was ending, not with a negotiated peace or a gradual decline, but with the systematic elimination of every alien species that had dared to threaten humanity's children. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you cornered the most dangerous predators in the universe. The Nexus system had been home to 12 billion alien lives for over 2 million years. Their cities floated in space around their ancient sun, connected by bridges of light that had been built when humans were still learning to make fire. Children had been born and raised in those floating cities for countless generations, never knowing fear or war. Captain Jung Minseo stood calmly on the bridge of the Retribution, watching the peaceful solar system on his main screen. In 47 minutes, none of it would exist anymore. "Engineering, begin stellar collapse sequence," he ordered, his voice as steady as if he were ordering lunch. Lieutenant Bai Jion's fingers moved across her console with practiced precision. The stellar manipulation device reached across space and touched the heart of the Nexus sun, changing the way its atoms behaved. Stellar collapse initiated, Captain. Gravity well expanding exactly as our models predicted. Jung Minseo watched without any emotion as the oldest civilization in the galaxy began to die. The sun started shrinking, pulling everything around it into an ever-tightening spiral of destruction. The beautiful floating cities, the ancient libraries, the peaceful families having dinner together, all of it was being pulled into a growing black hole that would consume everything within 20 light years. Target eliminated, he reported to Earth Command as the last traces of the Nexus civilization disappeared into darkness. Moving to next coordinates. Across Council space, the same horrific scene was playing out on dozens of worlds. Major Kim, Taehyung's bioweapons had been released on Hegemony Prime 6 hours earlier. The diseases were designed not just to kill, but to cause as much pain and suffering as possible before death came. Entire cities were filled with the dying, and there was nothing their advanced medicine could do to stop it. The weapons were perfectly crafted for each species. What killed the bird-like Hegemony citizens in agony would have no effect on the plant-like Velthari. But humans had created different bioweapons for every alien race, each one designed to exploit their specific weaknesses and cause maximum suffering. Colonel Oh Min-woo commanded a squadron of human ships that specialized in planetary destruction. His antimatter warheads could crack worlds like eggs, turning solid planets into expanding clouds of debris. He had already destroyed 3 Council homeworlds that morning, and his ships were moving toward their 4th target. Antimatter charges deployed, his weapons officer reported. Planet cracking sequence will complete in 15 minutes. Understood, Oh Min-woo replied, making notes in his mission log. Estimated casualties? 8 billion, sir. Complete extinction of the Zorthek species. On Earth, deep beneath Cheyenne Mountain, Admiral Park Min-ho coordinated the galaxy-wide genocide with the same calm efficiency that a factory manager might use to track production quotas. Status reports flowed in from across space, each one confirming the destruction of another alien civilization. Status report on the Velthari system? He asked Captain Lee Jung-woo, who was monitoring the operation from a nearby station. Complete sterilization achieved, sir, Lee Jung-woo reported without any emotion in his voice. 15 billion casualties confirmed. Our sensors detect no survivors anywhere in the system. The Velthari had been a peaceful species that looked like walking flowers. They had never fought a war in their entire million-year history. They had created beautiful art, wonderful music, and poetry that could make other species cry with joy. Now they were all dead, killed by human weapons that turned their bodies into poison. Meanwhile, Captain Han Ji-soo commanded a fleet of 300 human vessels that was hunting down the remaining Council ships trying to flee the massacre. Her communications officer looked up from his station with a puzzled expression. Captain, we're receiving surrender offers from several alien ships. They're saying they'll serve as slaves if we spare their homeworld. Han Ji-soo didn't even blink. Negative, continue bombardment. Leave nothing alive. But sir, they have families on board, children. I said continue bombardment, Han Ji-soo repeated, her voice cold as space itself. The Council threatened human children. Now they get to watch theirs die. The alien ships that had tried to surrender were destroyed within minutes. Their desperate pleas for mercy cut short by human weapons that showed no more emotion than a thunderstorm. Within 3 weeks, half the galaxy's intelligent species had been reduced to scattered refugees hiding in the dark spaces between stars. The ancient council that had ruled peacefully for millions of years was learning what real warfare looked like when it was practiced by a species that had evolved through constant conflict. Every human victory was total and final. They didn't capture territory to rule over later. They didn't take prisoners to exchange. They didn't negotiate treaties or accept surrenders. They simply eliminated every trace of the species that had threatened them as completely as if they had never existed at all. The message was becoming terrifyingly clear to the few aliens still alive to receive it. Humanity didn't fight wars to achieve political goals or gain resources. They fought wars to permanently eliminate anything they saw as a threat to their survival. And once they decided you were an enemy, Nothing in the universe could save you from what came next. The galaxy was learning that some sleeping monsters should never be awakened. Supreme Chancellor. Mordekan's knees scraped against the broken concrete as he knelt in what used to be the most beautiful city in the galaxy. Just a month ago, Nexus Prime had been a shining jewel of crystal towers that reached toward the stars, connected by bridges of pure light. Now it was nothing but smoking ruins and twisted metal, with fires still burning in the distance. Around him, the last few council members who were still alive huddled together like frightened children. Ambassador Velthar, who had once spoken so confidently about human primitiveness, now shook uncontrollably as his forearms wrapped around his injured body. Commander Thexara's jellyfish-like form had turned grey with shock, her tentacles barely able to keep her floating. Above them, the sky was filled with human warships. Hundreds of sleek black vessels hung motionless in the air like sleeping predators, their weapons pointed down at the survivors. The ships were completely silent, which somehow made them even more terrifying than if they had been roaring with engine noise. Mordekan's ancient hands trembled as he picked up the communication device from the rubble beside him. His voice came, out as barely a whisper, cracked with desperation and fear. "Please," he said into the device, "we surrender. We offer you our complete submission." The response came immediately through the speakers, Admiral Lee Soyoung's voice as cold and emotionless as the space between stars. "You had your chance for peaceful coexistence, Chancellor. You chose instead to threaten humanity's children." "We were wrong," Mordekan screamed, his voice echoing off the broken buildings around him. "We'll give you anything you want. Our territory, our resources, our technology. Just name your price." Behind him, the other surviving council members began crying and begging as well. These were beings who had ruled the galaxy for millions of years, whose civilizations were ancient when Earth was still covered in simple bacteria. Now they were reduced to pleading for their lives like desperate refugees. High above in orbit, Admiral Lee Soyoung stood on the bridge of her flagship, looking down at the destroyed planet through the main viewing screen. Her uniform was perfectly clean and pressed, not a single wrinkle showing the strain of commanding a month-long campaign of total warfare. Around her, human officers worked quietly at their stations, monitoring the complete destruction they had brought to the galaxy. Captain Park Jimin looked up from his tactical station, reading numbers from his display with professional calm. "Admiral, we've confirmed the elimination of 89% of all Council military assets. Their fleets are completely destroyed. Civilian casualties now exceed 200 billion across all their worlds." Lee Soyoung nodded, without any emotion showing on her face. To her, these weren't shocking numbers. They were simply the mathematics of extinction being carried out exactly as planned. "Open a channel to all surviving Council vessels throughout the galaxy." Her communications officer pressed a few buttons, and suddenly every remaining alien ship, every hidden base, every desperate refugee camp could hear her voice. It echoed across thousands of light years, reaching into every corner of what had once been Council space. "This is Admiral Lee Soyoung of the Terran Empire," she announced, her words carrying the weight of absolute authority. "Your civilization exists now only because we permit it to exist. You will immediately disarm all remaining weapons, surrender every military asset you still possess, and submit to complete human oversight." She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in across the galaxy before continuing with deadly finality. "Any act of resistance, any attempt to rebuild your military forces, any threat made against human interests will result in the immediate and complete extinction of your species. You have seen what we are capable of. Do not test our resolve again. Down." On the planet's surface, Supreme Chancellor Mordekan listened to the terms with tears streaming down his face. The great galactic civilization that had existed for millions of years, that had survived wars, plagues, and cosmic disasters, had been completely crushed in less than a month by a species they had dismissed as primitive barbarians. With shaking hands, he signed the surrender documents, officially ending the Council's rule and beginning humanity's dominance over the galaxy. The other survivors watched in silence as their ancient leader put his signature on papers that turned their entire species into subjects of the human empire. The age of council dominance was over. The age of human supremacy had begun. And every alien child who would be born from that day forward would grow up knowing that humanity was not just another species among many. They were the apex predators who had proven that anyone who threatened them would face total annihilation. The galaxy had a new master, and it had learned that master's first lesson the hardest way possible. 5 years had passed since the galaxy learned to fear humanity, and Captain Kimnari walked slowly through the long hallways of what used to be the Council's most prestigious learning center. Her boots echoed on the polished floors as she inspected the facility that had once trained the galaxy's brightest alien minds to become diplomats and leaders. Now it served a very different purpose. The building looked almost the same as it had before the war. The same tall windows let in sunlight, the same elegant architecture curved gracefully toward the ceiling, and the same beautiful artwork decorated the walls. But everything felt different now. The alien students who walked these halls kept their eyes down and spoke in whispers, afraid that speaking too loudly might anger their human supervisors. Kimnari stopped outside a classroom door and listened to the lesson being taught inside. Through the small window, she could see about 30 young Nexus students, their purple skin and 4 arms making them easy to identify. They were maybe 10 years old in human terms, still children who should have been playing games and learning about art and music. Instead, they stood in perfect rows, reciting words in unison like a military drill. "Humanity is the apex species," their small voices said together. "Resistance is extinction. Compliance is survival." Their teacher, an adult, Nexus female named Kelvara, stood at the front of the classroom with tears in her large eyes. Kimnari knew her story. She had been a respected professor of philosophy before the war, teaching alien students about peace and cooperation between species. During the human assault, she had watched through her apartment window as human ships turned her beautiful homeworld into a burning wasteland. Now she taught a very different kind of lesson. Her voice shook as she led the children through their daily recitation of human superiority, knowing that any sign of rebellion would mean death not just for her, but for every student in her care. Across the galaxy, Admiral Park Min-ho sat in his office in the rebuilt capital city, reading the daily reports that came in from every former council world. His desk was made from rare wood brought from Earth, and the walls were decorated with paintings of human victories from throughout history. Through his massive windows, he could see the bustling streets of a city that had been completely reconstructed according to human designs. "Status report on the outer sectors," he asked Colonel Choi Dae-hyun, who stood at attention beside his desk. "Complete compliance across all territories, sir," Choi replied, reading from his data pad. "The remaining alien populations have been fully integrated into our labor system. Industrial productivity is up 340% since we completed the pacification process." Park Min-ho nodded with satisfaction. The word pacification was the official term humans used to describe the process of breaking the alien populations completely, ensuring they would never again have the will or ability to resist human rule. It had taken 3 years of careful psychological conditioning, but the results spoke for themselves. "Any signs of unrest or organized resistance?" the Admiral asked. "None whatsoever, sir. Crime rates are virtually zero. The alien populations are so terrified of punishment that they police themselves. Most rebellion attempts are reported to us by other aliens before they even begin." Through his office windows, Park Min-ho could see the monument that had been built where the old council chamber used to stand. It was a simple black stone pillar that reached 50 feet into the sky, with words carved in 17 different alien languages. "Here stood those who threatened humanity's children. Let their fate serve as an eternal warning to all who would repeat their mistake." Every day, thousands of aliens walked past that monument on their way to work in the human-run factories and offices. Every day they were reminded of what happened to species that dared to challenge humanity. The monument wasn't just a warning. It was a promise that the same fate awaited anyone foolish enough to test human resolve again. Captain Han Ji-soo commanded the Terran garrison fleet that patrolled the outer systems, making sure that no alien population ever forgot who their masters were. Her ships would appear without warning in orbit around alien worlds, conducting routine inspections that served no purpose except to remind the inhabitants that humans were always watching. Any hint of resistance, no matter how small, was met with immediate and overwhelming force. When a group of young hegemony adults tried to hold a secret meeting to discuss their lost freedom, Han's ships destroyed their entire city from orbit. When Velthari farmers tried to hide food from human collectors, their entire planet was blockaded until half the population starved. The aliens learned quickly that humans didn't believe in measured responses or proportional punishment. If you broke one small rule, they would destroy everything you loved. If you spoke one word of defiance, your entire species might pay the price. The galaxy was at peace now, but it was the cold, silent peace of a graveyard. Across 1,000 worlds, alien children grew up learning human history in school, studying the wars and conquests that had shaped humanity's violent past. They learned about the world wars, the colonial expansions, the countless conflicts that had taught humans how to fight and win at any cost. Most importantly, they learned the final lesson that their own leaders had discovered too late. Never threaten a species that has spent its entire evolutionary history perfecting the art of war. Humans weren't just another intelligent race among many. They were apex predators who had clawed their way to the top of their own planet through millions of years of conflict and survival. In the end, the Council had gotten exactly what they asked for, though not in the way they expected. They had demanded humanity's submission and received instead the galaxy's new masters, patient, calculating predators who showed no mercy to anyone who dared threaten the safety of human children. The age of human dominance had begun, built upon the ashes and bones of those foolish enough to mistake human patience for human weakness.